Hi, I'm Dr. Teresa A. Smith, Dr. Taz, and welcome to this edition of Talk with Taz. Today, I'm excited to welcome to my show Dr. Lauren Martin. Hi, Miss Laura. How you doing?
I'm technically challenged, but I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for being on my show, Dr. Lauren Martin. Let me go through the so everybody understands. She is a psychotherapist, she's a poet, and she is a devoted Iana Epa. I'm perhaps
You
mispronouncing
did
it.
good. It's Ianifa, but it's very hard, that word.
Thank you, Ianipa. She is based in Oakland, California. She has been on a spiritual walk that has helped her to transform, and it has informed her poetry that is portrayed in The Night of the Hawk. Her themes that sort of drive her work and her written work is healing, loss, love, and empowerment, and how that impacts the human experience. So, Dr. Lauren, welcome to my show. I'm so glad to have you. I want to jump right in. Can you share, because you're a psychotherapist, but
Mhm.
now you've written this work that's receiving a lot of acclaim, and it's poetry. And I talked about the fact that your focus is loss, love, and healing. And now you've written a book as a psychotherapist. Can you share the moment or perhaps the experience that first drew you to writing?
I was really young and first of all, I was born seeing the dead, so that was always something that I had to negotiate in a Western world where seers are not really understood.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was a very solitary experience, which I certainly write about in my work, sort of the isolation of feeling different. And I think that's a universal theme. We all feel that. But when I was in sixth grade, I had written something, I have no recollection of what, but I got pulled out of class and I thought I was in trouble, but it turned out I they were suggesting that I was a poet and I didn't even know what poetry was. And from that
Mhm.
point on, I started writing and I studied it um, through high school and college. And I kind of assumed that I would compile a book after college and start submitting, but then I just became really enveloped with my own psychoanalytic training and this very arduous shamanic course that took a long time to sort out.
Now, shamanic, you help the audience to understand what that is and how it impacted everything that you do now.
So I think there are lots of different forms of shamanism. Most religions have a root to them that is more esoteric. But historically, when we all kind of began, there were these religions or tribal-based traditions that were um, monotheistic, believed in one God, but worshipped representations of God and nature. And I personally haven't my own particular experience with being a seer. Not every shaman does, but not having a structure for managing that, the dead or the ghosts of my life really, or of the world, really made my life disrupted. And so I began to seek in all of the traditions a way to calm the mischievous nature of the dead that are still here and unhappy and try to sort that out. And I ended up in West Africa in the tradition Ifa. So
You've got several, you've got internal things that are happening with
yeah,
you personally, but then
yeah,
you've got those external things that are happening. How did all of that come to bear with your writing?
it's a great question. Well, actually, I think they're all similar, being a therapist and being a poet and being a shaman, because they all deal with death in some way, shape, or form. They deal with darkness. And to be a good therapist, you have to feel comfortable in the dark, which so many therapists get people there and then they medicate them or over medicate them. So I think it's all sort of this journey to and through the dark night of the soul, which you do as a therapist and comes through my poetry and certainly with my shamanism and kind of having these whether it's individual people or crimes that are unresolved, I can then use spiritual work to try to resolve those issues. So it's busy, but my poems actually come as dreams. So I think they are often gifts from various ancestors or dead that want me to communicate something for them. So I don't really feel, I feel in some ways like my being a channel generally is coming through in poetry, and I wake up and it's there, the poem is there.
You get your poems manifest for you in your dreams. What is that like? Describe that.
I mean, I certainly have the other thing because I have some other writing that's more psychoanalytic,
Mhm.
that you're describing, which is so interesting as a writer, that feeling of something that's just appeared there that you have to get out, and you're not satisfied until it's out there. And you're trying to write as fast as your thoughts are moving,
Yeah.
but the poems are different in that I really do wake up and have a poem there. Or if I fall asleep at acupuncture is a huge place for me. The whole thing will be there, and it requires typically very few edits. I
Mhm.
wrote a poem for the Chibok girls that I woke up with. It's a long poem, and it's sort of elegiac. And so I imagine it's somebody's ancestor, one of those girls telling me to communicate on their behalf. So things like that. It's very different than the other writing.
I've learned to reach out to the individual when they're on my mind. And everything was great. And we had a great conversation. It was so good to catch up with them. But even though things were great, I still know they were in my heart
All
for a
right.
reason. And I
Yes.
can never forget that.
Right.
It may mean that I need to reach out to them more this year
Right.
because they
Right.
were in my heart for a reason.
Reason.
And when I think about someone, well, I won't thinking about them. Let me
Right.
be clear. I dreamed about them. When I
Which is
dream about
different.
somebody,
Yeah.
it's very different.
And it's
Um,
different from a regular dream. People always ask me that, how do you know it's not just your own personal dream? But, to me, I mean, I grew up seeing and hearing the dead, and actually hearing the Yoruba chanting, which I didn't know was Yoruba, and a certain kind of drug, the Ogoni drum. But I'm trained in dream interpretation, and you can tell they're just, is you have the disguise. The dream that is a dream has disguise. It has confusion. It doesn't make sense. It's not linear. That's a dream. That's your unconscious trying to express something. But a message to me from the divine is very specific. And usually I sometimes have people come into the dream and say, my name is X. This is a picture of my grandson. This is who you're going to see tomorrow. These are the things you need to tell him. And then I'll meet that person the next day in a restaurant or something like that. And then if I don't tell them the message, I feel sick, you know.
mhm.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the Night of the Hawk. So, the Night of the Hawk is a collection of your poetry. You have lots of poetry.
Yes.
How did you select the poems that you were going to use in this acclaimed work? How did you select those poems?
I'm always trying to weave the kind of themes of what's happening in my world, in an arc, like over a period of time developmentally, with what's happening spiritually. Um, and so to me, the As the Bow Breaks series, which is spelled BOW for it, because you know, it's about abuse and dynamics with men, particularly, a lot with my dad. And bow as in, reverence. I am trying to discuss the changes that happen over the course of a lifetime, where you begin as a child in your perspective, and then as you age and your parents age, where you kind of reconcile the dynamic. And similarly, I feel like that. is true in my spiritual life. There are poems that really describe my own frustration with my destiny and sort of the isolation of it, and my joy in the beauty of it, and my reverence for what we call the Orisha, which are representations of God and nature. Um, and then within that, there's tons of poems about misogyny and what it's like to age as a woman in our culture. But yeah, some heartbreak, some good heartbreak. I'm always writing my heartbreak.
Oh, yes, we experienced them.
Yeah.
And my platform, I try to be as transparent as possible. And my thing going into 2025 is to be even more transparent because there are days that I'm not 100%.
Right.
No matter how much I talk to myself, that positive self-talk, I just
Yeah.
am not.
Yeah.
And I think that the general public needs to understand that that's life.
That's
So if
life.
you're not 100% that day, that's okay. And
Right.
of course, as a therapist, you know the importance of that, but that's a hard concept
Yeah.
to sit with and to
Truly.
know that it's sort of your superpower if you can ever sit with it and
If you can do it.
understand it. If you
That's
can do
right.
it, if
Right.
you can do it. But you've done it.
Yeah.
You have done
Thank you.
it. And you've done it and you've come out on the other side. Now, you talked about the poem, The Bow, and its
Mm.
significance. And that resonated with me because you talked about, how you marry, so to speak, the poems and the spirituality and
Right.
how they sort of overlap or are part of that arc.
Right.
Um, do you think, though, that the meaning of poetry changes over time, both for you as the writer and then for your readers?
I think what's cool about poetry is that it leaves a lot of room for people to make it their own. Um, that there's a lot of interpretation because it's like memoir. It is personal to me, but it also has space for people to think and emphasize different points. Sometimes I don't love it. I had this, one review was so funny because I have this poem I love that you know, is talks about a moment when I found out my ex-boyfriend was cheating on me. And um, he was so desperate to justify what he had done. He was like, well, you always need to be right. So of course I referenced that in the poem, and then somebody interpreted that as me being, kind of narcissistic. And so I either didn't communicate it well, or that's what they needed to see. And I think
You can see
people
it.
are so individualized, and the work, once it's gone from your hands, has a whole other life.
And that's so funny, Dr. Lauren, because, you know, you correct me.
Yeah.
Sometimes narcissistic people deflect. You know what I'm saying? They deflect, and then so that's my thing with what that person said. It could have been deflected on their
Oh, they
part.
project
Oh,
all over the
absolutely.
place. I mean, ugh, I just wrote a whole book about narcissism, which I haven't been able to get picked up because, people, publishers have said it's too academic. I don't think it is because my clients understand it. I've given it to them. But it really talks about that piece of, kind of truly understanding that diagnosis that's being thrown around like crazy, and
Mhm.
how much of the time the people that are throwing it around are actually narcissistic and projecting onto other people. Yep, you're
Absolutely.
very right. Yep.
And because when you said that the poem, you make the statement about your ex-boyfriend, your ex said that you just have to be right.
Right.
Why do I have to be right?
Right.
Now that we are trying to address what you've done, you're
Exactly.
saying it's my fault.
Yeah.
No, no, no. It's not
Yeah.
that I gotta be right. Let's just deal with the
With
behavior.
facts, like basic facts. I know people have a really hard time holding reality, and I think particularly if they've done something bad,
Mhm.
in order to get to a place where you can do something that's harmful to another person, you have to be steeped in self-justification. So when you get confronted, of course you're going to blame the other person. And that's just it's a sad, nature of how human beings are managing their pain.
Mhm.
Therapy, therapy, therapy. It's so helpful.
But it's an interesting thing, though. Um, Now, because you did mention early on that you do have your academic writing, but
Mhm.
we're talking about your poetry. So one of my question is looking back over your writing career, what has been some of the most significant milestones or turning points for you? And that could be either your poetry or in your in the academic arena.
I
What's been
think the most, I mean, it's so, for me, the most important things are my interactions with other people. Publishing this book has allowed me to meet so many people like you that are so thoughtful. It's so cool. I mean, particularly so I left New York and I came to California and I got injured here. So I didn't even have my friends.
Mm,
And then the book has connected me with all these incredible fellow authors. And it's really lovely to just get an experience of connecting to other people, because for me, I feel like that's where God lives. I mean, obviously in nature and the Orisha and all these things, but in that exchange that's so pure, when people can get away from their own projections and actually connect and hear each other, I really think that is the experience of God for me. It's so meaningful. So I've really enjoyed this whole, promotion that Night of the Hawk demanded, because I've gotten to meet such amazing people like yourself.
well, thank you. I got another question for you. Why did you why did you title the book The Night of the Hawk?
It's such a good question. So this is a little bit of a complicated answer, but in Ifa, there's a divination system, and there are 256 possible combinations within that system. Each number set refers to what's called an Odu. And each Odu has 1,864 verses that are taught orally from elder to junior priest or priestess. So when you get initiated, you pull and cast your own Odu. But Yoruba believe that you come to the world with an Odu, whether you initiate or not. And that Odu speaks of your destiny. So in Ifa, I've always had hawks around me, and in my Odu, one leg actually is hawk, and it talks about issues with the mothers of the night, who are represented in large birds. So it's Night of the Hawk, referencing Iami, which are also witches, and
Mhm.
just this, I've lived a very different destiny, and my sister initiated also to support me, because we're so close. And she actually got the exact Odoo flipped on its head. And her Odoo speaks exactly of her life and who she is, and is far less complicated than mine. So I love that piece of Ifa, the kind of very elaborate details about your destiny and how it makes sense, that I was this kid that had things in the night going bump, and
Mhm.
my sister didn't. She was my support and my allegiance, but she didn't have those same issues. So that's how we got Night of the Hawk. Yeah.
And so I guess what I want to leave the audience with is that the Night of the Hawk, that darkness, that dark night of our soul, as I started earlier when I introduced you, I talked about the themes of healing, love, loss, and empowerment. That's what, in my mind, your poetry book is all about. And as you yourself have shared, it's a journey.
Yeah.
And so, if there are folks who want to go on this journey with you, where can they get the book, The Night of the Hawk? Where can they pick it up at?
You can pick it up on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, or I have a website. It's now being distributed by Simon and Schuster, so it's on there. My website is laurenmartin.net, and so there are a lot of different options on there for picking it up.
All righty then. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lauren Martin, for being my guest this episode of Talk with Taz. And to my audience, thank you again for joining us. And until next time, make sure you take care